Meg Rowley. Come for the ball, banter's free. Baseball is a simulation, it's all just one big conversation. Effectively Wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2520 of Effectively Wild, a FanGraphs baseball podcast brought to you by our Patreon supporters. I'm Meg Rowley of FanGraphs, and I'm joined by Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer. Ben, how are you?
Well, I just want everyone to know that last time when we bantered about the Mariners and how disappointing they've been and Dan Wilson's job security, etc., that was, to be clear, before the Milwaukee Brewers shut them out 22-0, tying the all-time record for biggest blowout that is also a shutout, which I keep wanting to blend those words to turn them into a portmanteau somehow, but they both end in out. So if I swap them, it just sounds like I'm saying blowout or shutout. It doesn't quite work, but the point is, a blowout might not be strong enough. This is a drubbing, a shellacking. I don't even know what the most apt term here is, but any degree to which you were down on the Mariners yesterday, that preceded this slaughter.
Yeah, I told you before we started recording that I did not watch a single. I didn't watch a single at bat of this game. A thing happens where, you know, you're a national baseball story, and sure, you might have a favorite team that you like to torture yourself with, but you want to stay abreast of the goings on across the league, right? Mm-hmm. And so my strategy on any given evening involves, unless there's like a really great marquee pitching matchup, in which case I will lock in on one game, I tend to bounce around, you know, and my bouncing around is dictated by the things you might expect. Who's pitching? How close is it? How late is it in the game? Is there a particular hitter that I'm trying to like get a feel for? These sorts of things. And so when your game starts, the funniest thing about this is that until the fifth inning, it was a one-run game, right? You know, when your game starts a little later into the evening than some of the others, and there are close and late situations with some other teams, and you're wanting to be clued in to, say, the Chicagos and what's going on with them, you think, I'll check in on that game later. And then you look up, Ben, and at the point when you might really be interested in checking in, it's 11-0.
Yeah, it got out of hand.
I'm going to do some swears for a second, okay? But I want to warn parents who might be listening to this. In the cars, they're picking their kid up from school, because some places, including here, the kids, they're back in school, Ben. You know, they're back to their learning.
Yeah. Yes.
I looked at the box score and I was like, well, I don't need to engage with this bullshit, you know? I have gone through a lot of different mechanisms of cope with the Seattle Mariners in my time as an observer of the team, a fan of the team. Sometimes I feel actively antagonistic toward them, and we're in that zone. Sometimes I feel like a pitiable detachment. I am at the point with this team, and it feels a little unfair in a year where the American League is as just lackluster and mid as it is when it's in its silo phase. I don't know if I'm using that comparison correctly. You tell me.
Not the Apple TV show that we discussed yesterday. Different silo.
The Apple TV show that we discussed yesterday, because it has a mid layer.
It has mids. Yes.
I'm trying to relate to your references, Ben.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't know that you would go back to that well, or that silo, but you're really relating to me, my interests.
But like, again, in a year, whereas we discussed on our previous episode, the American League is just like a land of suck. You know, it's pretty terrible. The third wild card spot. Well, I don't know. Are teams worried that if they make the postseason, something bad happens to them? Because none of these clubs are acting like they actually want to win, except for maybe the Tigers. I am at the point with this team where they need to earn my attention, and they're not earning my attention. They are earning my disdain. even our beautiful boy Julio, you can't forget how many outs there are in a game, in an inning. You can't be doing that. You can't be throwing the ball into the stands thinking, oh, we're done. You're not done. Sir, I have bad news. You have many more games to play yet.
Yes, just trying to get it over with. I sympathize, but
you know, it's bad. And I don't think that any one game should necessarily, particularly in baseball. You can make the argument in football, I think. And there's a proud tradition of like leaving your head coach on the tarmac in other sports, particularly football. I don't think any one game needs to cost anybody their job. And when you run up the score like this, now we will note, in the interests of full disclosure, of keeping an accurate accounting, 7 of those runs were Leo Rivas's. Leo Rivas.
I felt bad for poor Mariners utility man Leo Rivas, because he entered this game with 2 previous scoreless pitching appearances under his belt.
ERA is.
Yeah.
I'm going to do his ERA is
It is. He was charged with 9 runs, but only 7 were earned.
Only 7 of them were
earned. So, that helps a little bit. But yeah, he had to wear one. That was unfortunate for him.
He did have to wear one. And I'm of the opinion that no matter how many runs a position player surrenders in a blowout, they are performing an active service, right? They are engaged in service. So Leo Rivas, despite the fact that he gave up 7 earned runs, 9 total, I thank him for his service, because what are you going to do? Send a real reliever out there? No, that's it. That would be, if Dan Wilson had sent a real reliever out there after the mess of this game, then it would be immediately fireable, because, sir, what are you doing? Leo Rivas has other purposes on this roster, and I'll be honest, has a weird place in Mariners postseason lore for having done good stuff. And this team almost went to the World Series last year, Ben.
Sure did.
This dumb, rude, disinterested, waste of my time team. I can't believe that. That is crazy. We're not yet out of the swearing phase. Sorry. Again, I don't know that any one baseball game should cost you your job. And I feel bad calling for someone's livelihood. Everybody's got to pay for housing, and everything's so expensive now.
Yeah.
Groceries, coffee. You're not a coffee drinker.
No.
We're just doing this. You're not a coffee drinker. You're a tea man. Have tea prices gone up as much as coffee prices have gone up? Because let me tell you, when I buy a bag of beans, I'm lucky. And look, I'm buying nice beans, so some of this is self-inflicted. But I'm lucky if I'm getting out of there for less than $20 for a bag of beans.
Yeah, it's inelastic demand for me when it comes to tea. I'm going to just pay whatever I need to pay.
Right. They have me. They have me. What am I going to do? Not drink coffee? What am I going to do? Drink bad coffee? No, I'm not going to do that. Life is already so hard so much of the time. I'm a fan of the Mariners. What am I going to do? Drink bad coffee? No.
Yeah. Inflation in the run totals too. It's just across the board. It's really, this tied, as I mentioned, the all-time record for the margin of victory in a blowout / shutout, because there had been 2 previous 22-0 victories. The Pirates over the Cubs, September 16th, 1975, and Cleveland over the Yankees, August 31st, 2004. But much as there's something unnatural to me, a northerner, when I hear about kids going back to school in mid-August, too early.
We don't do that in Seattle. That's like a September activity. But I'm glad the kids are in school here, because it means they have access to reliable air conditioning. That makes good sense.
Yeah, it's a regional thing. There are reasons for it. I get it. It's agrarian and work in the fields and so forth, and climate. But that always makes me pity the poor children. I know they get out earlier often too, but it's hard to go back nonetheless. But there's something similarly unnatural in having a game that is this lopsided, that is still a shutout, because usually if you're up by that much, you are not really going all out defensively if you're the team that is blowing out its opponent. And the Brewers weren't either. We had double-barreled position player pitching action, because Gary Sanchez got into this game for Milwaukee. Milwaukee catcher Gary Sanchez was charged with finishing this game, and he did. And he pitched a scoreless inning.
He did.
So that just added insult to injury, really, when they put in their position player pitcher and you can't touch him. And because usually if you're up by that much, yeah, you kind of mutually throw in the towel and just say, let's get this over with. Maybe not by prematurely throwing the ball into the stands or something, but by just, sacrificial lambs on the mound and waving the white flag. We established recently that's what one does with a white flag. And they did that. The Brewers said, all right, we'll take our foot off your neck here. We will just let you try to get off the mat if you can. And they still couldn't
do it.
even when Gary Sanchez was in. So
They couldn't do it.
that's rough. That is really rough because usually there's at least like a courtesy run or two at the end of a blowout when a position player pitcher comes in. You at least feel a little bit better about yourself. You got on the board, or maybe that's almost condescending and you feel even worse. It's like we needed them to put in a not real pitcher in order to push a run across, but they couldn't even do that.
They couldn't even do that.
Yeah. Bleak.
It is one of those things where you have to wonder, like, what is the next day like for everyone in that locker room? Like they're getting to the ballpark today, and they're gonna have to play baseball. Then they have to play baseball. They're gonna have to. And here's the thing: this is a bad enough beat that, like, sure, they had to answer questions about it last night. They're gonna have to answer other questions about it today. They're not done talking about this. They're not done being forced to talk about this. They are going to have to continue to talk about this. And the other thing about it, I'm seeing the Julio thing again. Julio, my good sir. Just the play. God.
Wow. I feel bad about bringing this up already.
No, I mean, like, the other thing about it is that, like, if by some miracle this stupid team, I'm going to be really mean about them, okay? And I want everyone to know I sound like I sound like a jerk. And I know that I'm entitled to be a little bit of a jerk because what an embarrassment this is. But I like the Mariners, hypothetically,
Yeah.
And I care about people who work for that baseball team. I want them to do well. That's why I'm so angry, is because I want them to do well. But I am being a little bit of a jerk. And if anyone listening feels hurt by that, I am sorry. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the idea of the team you work for. I bet they're mad. I bet you're mad at them too.
Sure.
You can let that in. You can let in that you're mad at them. It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to. I'm not saying you have to call for Dan to get fired. I'm not saying, I don't know. I don't even really think this is Dan's fault. This one, I don't. But sometimes it's like, hey, if the start of the Red Sox season is enough for the entire coaching staff to get fired, basically, if the start of the Philly season is enough for, I always want to call him Rob Thompson. Every time I want to call him Rob Thompson. I was secretly a little relieved when he got fired because I was like, I know in a professional setting, I'm going to call him Rob Thompson. And then someone's going to look at me and be like, aren't you the editor-in-chief of literally FanGraphs and you don't know this man's name?
Okay, so you have so screwed yourself up with his name that you are getting it right, but are thinking you're getting it wrong. Because you've confused him with Rob Thomas before, but he is Rob Thompson. You've incepted yourself.
I bamboozled myself.
You've so psyched yourself out.
Wait, his name is Rob. Right.
Rob Thompson.
Rob Thompson with a P. There's a P in there. We're sure
no,
there's a P.
There's no P. Yeah, that's an additional layer of confusion.
Right,
it's Thompson without the P.
It's Thompson.
Yeah.
So this was the other. No. So you're right that you're right that I was worried I would call him Rob Thomas, like the singer of Matchbox 20. But I was also worried that I would call him Rob Thompson with a P because I want to add a P to that name, just like I want to add a P to Grumpkin.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Usually you can't tell, actually. If you say it quickly, it sort of sounds the same. So I would not have known.
I know, but it feels like there should be a P in there. Anyway, Ben, if the start of the Phillies season was enough for Rob Thompson to get fired, I think that this demands an answer. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, Ben. I don't know what it is. And I don't want anyone to lose their job, but aren't people going to lose their jobs anyway? Like, at some point here who apparently isn't losing his job is Jerry. What's up with that? You know how long Jerry's been the GM? Remember when Jack Sorensic was our problem? I mean, not your problem. You've never been a Mariners fan. You weren't cursed in that way. The worst thing that happened to you in 1995 is that the Yankees lost and you were briefly disappointed. That was the worst thing that happened to you that year. Yep. But to me, I got saddled with this.
Oh boy. Well, I'm glad that you've unburdened yourself, though it sounds like you are still somewhat burdened. But yes, the bile is out of your brain. We will try to clear that from our minds. And this ends the more profane part of this podcast.
Yeah,
probably.
I'm sorry.
We'll see. You never know where this thing's going to go. Maybe the Mariners will come up again. But
no, we can be done talking about them. Why would we talk about them? They're not a serious concern. They're not a serious franchise. This team that was almost in the World Series last year.
Well, from the team of Mount Rainier, I will segue to Bryce Rainer. That was pretty strange.
No, I thought that was smooth.
It wasn't as bad as Scherzer Scherzo, but
that was terrible.
That's a low bar. Anyway, I've been thinking about Bryce Rainer, who is a shortstop prospect for the Tigers, and a good one. They have not run out of good position player prospects, though they keep promoting them. They've got another one. Rainer is their first-round pick, 11th overall in 2024, and he is, according to FanGraphs, a top 25 prospect in baseball, number 25 to be precise. Other places have him maybe a little lower, but still high. Yeah. And I was thinking about him because he was the subject of David Laurela's Sunday Notes this past Sunday. And it was about how Bryce Rainer was a pretty legit two-way prospect. And he had his pitching deprecated. He has not been a pitcher since he was drafted by the Tigers, but he was a real pitching prospect. And there is an alternate history or present where he could be trying the two-way thing. And there were quotes from Laurela in here, or quotes relayed by Laurela from Rainer, that made it sound sort of like he's a little bit wistful about not pitching anymore. And he went to Harvard Westlake High School in North Hollywood, big-time baseball talent school. And he was a successful pitcher, and he sat mid-90s and would sometimes get into the upper 90s. He had a bunch of pitches, fastball curve, slider change. And according to this Laurela piece, which cites some Eric Longenhagen scouting reports, scouts for a multitude of teams were keeping close watch when he stood atop the bump. Rainer told Laurela, "There was a good bit of interest. I pitched a lot in high school, and for a small period of time, there was some thought that I was going to pitch after I got drafted. There were definitely some conversations with teams. I can't remember which ones, but yeah, I pitched for Team USA in Taiwan a little bit, so there was talk about me being a two-way." And then Laurela asked him if that possibility was discussed when Detroit drafted him, and he said that the idea of his pitching was banged pretty early on. Some excellent baseball lingo for those who are not familiar with being banged, usually in the context of a rain out. When a game is rained out, people say it was banged. And he sometimes wonders, he says, whether he could have had success as a two-way pro player. He said, "It definitely crosses my mind. The competitive aspect of athletes, including baseball players, has you believing that you can do something. I've obviously never tried it in pro ball, but I think I could do it." And then he says, "But no, I kind of just go day by day. And right now I'm an infielder. I'm doing what the Tigers want me to do, and I'm happy with that. I feel that we made the right decision." And maybe he does actually feel that way and isn't just sort of towing the party line there. And he's doing just fine. Obviously, it's working out well for him. He's in high A. He's 21. He's more than holding his own. He's a highly rated prospect. So far, so good. But this did kind of disappoint me as a fan of potential two-way players, because he seems like he would have been a solid candidate to do it. And everyone's been on two-way watch ever since Ohtani showed up and proved that it could be done in MLB. And everyone's been speculating about whether there would be a wave of two-way prospects, or at least whether some guys who potentially had the chops to do it would be allowed a longer leash and at least get a chance to strut their stuff and see if they could hack it. I asked Eric Longenhagen about this and whether he was a genuinely promising pitcher and whether he could have been a pro pitcher. And Eric said, yes, he was 93 to 96 at NHSI during his draft year. Good breaking stuff. Delivery, not great. Fastball shape, not great. Of course, that could have been refined. He was young. He was in high school. A lot of development left. Eric says he was probably more like a 1.5-ish million type on the mound, as in his draft bonus if he had just been a pitcher purely. And he ultimately signed for close to $6 million, almost 5.8, which was slightly above slot value for the 11th overall pick. So this was the more remunerative path for him. But of course, he could have potentially been a two-way guy and gotten that kind of bonus too. So it just sort of bums me out that this guy who was that talented and really could have made a go of it and at least had some serious talks with teams about trying it, then got to the Tigers and they just shut the door and said, nope, you're a position player now. And he said, okay. And he has resigned himself to that. And maybe it'll work out just fine. But if he can't get a shot to do it, even just a trial, then who can, really? So there has not been a post-Ohtani two-way wave. And I've been waiting to see, not that there are that many strong candidates to do it, because it's really hard to do, but when one comes along, it seems like even now, for the most part, you're still just getting typecast and boxed into going one way.
I wonder what it is going to take. Like, who will truly be the first guy to be given very serious consideration? Because it felt like we were going to maybe have greater imagination around it and around the potential developmental path. And I just wonder if the next guy will be another international two-way player, right? If you will need the proof of concept of having done it at a high level in an international pro league before we get someone who is really given the chance to do it again in MLB. So
Yeah. And maybe it will just require someone who is more balanced than Bryce Rainer, because even if he was promising as a pitcher, evidently he was more promising as a hitter. So if there were someone who would have commanded the same sort of bonus as a pitcher and a hitter and just could have really gone either way and it wouldn't have made much of a difference, then maybe then, because I've been thinking about that with someone like Dave Winfield or John Olerud, guys who were really accomplished college pitchers and were talked about as potential pitchers in the pros or two-way guys. And maybe if they came along now preternaturally talented, had success as pitchers at that level, maybe they would have the leverage or the clout or just the track record to get to do that. Again, it's hard to say that those guys, one is in the Hall of Fame, the other came close, could be someday. So it's not as if it didn't work out for them. It's mostly that it wasn't quite as fun. Olerud, one of my favorite players of all time, and Winfield, widely beloved by those who watched him play as well. So it's not as if they were busts or anything. But yeah, if the equivalent of those guys came along now, maybe that's what it would take. But there are not many of those guys. Or I guess if Rainer had been a little less good as a position player, a non-pitcher, then maybe that would have worked too. But it just has to be perfectly calibrated. It's just you have to walk this line where you're good enough at both to do it, but you're not better enough at one to just be encouraged to specialize at that one thing. So it's really that sort of skill set comes along very infrequently.
Yeah, it's a tricky calibration to engage in, for sure.
Well, if things don't work out for him at the plate in the field, then he could always pivot to pitching again at some point. But hopefully for his sake, this works out great and everyone's happy with it and no one really thinks about the road not traveled, except me. I will, because I will lament if Bryce Rainer turns out to be a Hall of Fame shortstop. I will still wonder, but how good could he have been on the mound? And if he's too good at shortstop, then he probably won't even even be brought in like Leo Rivas to
Oh my
be
gosh.
the mop
Can't
up
believe
man in a blowout.
Bring it up again.
Sorry.
I don't understand why you would even. Why would you even?
My apologies. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
All
so
right.
sorry.
Well, speaking of phenoms, I tuned in to a game that has already been played. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, and it was appointment viewing for me to watch Bryce Rainer's organization, the big club, the parent club, the Tigers, because they were going up against Paul Skenes and the Pirates on Wednesday afternoon. And conveniently, it was an early game so that we could banter about it here. And it was Jackson Jobe versus Paul Skenes, just a couple of highly touted 24-year-olds going toe-to-toe here. And it felt like a high-stakes game, particularly for Skenes and the Pirates, because he had not pitched in a while. He was going on 7 days rest because they pushed him back for a few days just to give him extra rest, clear his head, help with fatigue, whatever mechanics he's trying to iron out. And so all eyes were on this game and seeing whether Skenes could get out of this funk that everyone has been wondering about and we have talked about. Not really. No, not today. Not so much. He wasn't horrible, but yet again, he failed to complete the fifth inning for the second time in a row.
Yeah.
He had lousy command. His secondary stuff was all over the place. Everyone was watching his velo because the pitch speeds have been down and sinking further and further. And I guess the mildly good news was that there was a bit of a rebound from his last start where the pitch speeds really bottomed out and were like sitting sub 96. In this game, his four-seamer averaged 96.8, which was bang on his full season average and slightly up from the preceding start, but obviously way down from where he used to be and where he was even earlier this season. Topped out at 97.9. So even when he was trying to get out of jams, that was what he had, or at least that was what he threw. And, you know, we've talked a lot about how he has, or was at least for a while, intentionally dialed back the speed a little bit, seemingly in an attempt to preserve his arm. But nowadays, that doesn't seem to be the sole explanation, because even when he's in a situation where you would expect him to reach back for a little extra, he just doesn't seem to have that top-end speed anymore. So he went 4 1/3, 4 hits, 3 runs, all earned, 4 walks, 5 strikeouts. So he was missing some bats, but it was pretty shaky and it was pretty inefficient. And I was watching and things seemed to click in the fourth for a little while. He had a 1-2-3 and almost looked like the Skenes of old, but then just got shaky again in the fifth and got bounced from the game. So,
and had a moment in that frame where I was briefly concerned that he had injured himself. Like he had a funny delivery and he kind of came. I don't know what's going on, but it is not good.
And the line could have been worse because there was a nice catch by Brian Reynolds to save a run on what probably would have been an RBI single by Dylan Dingler that ended an inning. And then a runner he bequeathed, who was his responsibility, was thrown out at home after he left the game. So could have been worse, but it was not good. It didn't really allay any concerns whatsoever.
Yeah.
Pirates ultimately won the game, so that was the good news. They did beat Detroit 4-3, but Skenes has just not looked at all like himself, and that extra rest just does not seem to have cured what ailed him.
No, it does not. And I would imagine that he and the Pirates will spend an offseason, assuming he's not hurt, that they will spend the offseason sort of tinkering with the repertoire, the mechanics, the conditioning potentially, and trying to get him right. But because like their entire competitive window is built around this guy. So they got to figure out what's going on here. He's a smart guy. He's a very competitive guy. We know what the peak version of him looks like. So, and has demonstrated that peak over entire seasons, right? So I don't have any reason, again, barring some sort of catastrophic injury, to think that he can't figure stuff out again. But it does seem like a more substantial reset than just pushing a start back is maybe necessary here.
And the Pirates are still in it.
Yeah.
I've seen some people suggest he's just in such a funk. They should maybe just shut him down and don't get these bad habits more deeply ingrained. But they do have to figure out what's happening here and if they are all pretty confident that he's not doing additional damage to himself. But yeah, they're close enough that they're on the outside looking in, but still maybe could make a run. So it's tough to do that. It's funny. So he threw 81 pitches to get through 4 1/3, just very inefficient. And Braxton Ashcraft, who has of late emerged really as the ace of the staff, sort of, he has been hyper efficient lately, and he's in the top 10 in baseball in pitches per inning. And he took 80 pitches to get through 8 innings in his most recent start on Tuesday. And the start before that, he threw 85 pitches to throw a complete game, 9 innings. So he's just been mowing down opposing lineups. And Skenes, he's just not getting those chases. He's just not able to blow the ball by guys anymore. It's so confounding. And I've read so many analyses of what's happening. Everyone has their theories. And clearly there's something going on mechanically. I mean, people have identified all sorts of things. I mean, I've read now multiple Tom Verducci deep dives on this. I've read Alex Stumpf had a piece about this on Substack. There was a Travis Sawchik version. There's just everyone has
it back in July. Like we've been, this has been ongoing. I had the thought, I was like, should I assign the what's wrong with Paul Skenes piece? And I was like, oh, we already did this.
Already did. Yeah. Because it's been a month now since he has gone further than 5 1/3 in an outing. It's really something. And Jackson Jobe, who was opposing him here, recently returned from Tommy John surgery. I think he had, among the 2 starters, the 14 fastest pitches. I mean, he was the one touching triple digits here.
Yeah.
And Skenes was getting upstaged by Jobe and his stuff. And so everyone has pinpointed various mechanical issues and his stride length and his stride direction and his arm angle and the release angle. And is he flying open? Is he cross body? Is he not cross body enough? Like there are all these different theories. And it seems like there's a mix of things going on and that he's just lost the plot a little bit when it comes to his mechanics that were functioning so well. And I don't know why. And there's been scrutiny on the conditioning because, he's looking a little bit dad body relative to what he was before, but not anything unusual for a pitcher in particular. I mean, it's a baseball body.
Right. And this is why I said the conditioning in such a coy little way. Yeah. Because, well, he's a big guy, And as we have talked about many times, a lot of ways to be athletic. Yeah. I don't think he's he has not regressed physically in a way that I think is indicative of something really concerning. I don't even know how different his conditioning really is compared to where it's been in the past. Wouldn't we all look terrible standing next to Olivia on a beach, right? Who among us? If
he were pitching effectively, no one would be batting an eye about him putting on a pound or two. I mean, the same conversation has happened about Tarek Skubal this season. I've seen some of that, but we've seen some meaty pitchers be quite successful, and some of them will even say that it helps them. So you're just looking for anything that's different about Skenes because the results have been different and the stuff has been different. And so if the body looks a little bit different, then people are leaping to the conclusion that it's because of the body. And you could always consider it as a possible factor, of course, but I doubt that is the sole explanation or even the primary one. So it's tough. I guess, I think Jobe threw 18 pitches maybe faster than the fastest pitch Skenes threw, or maybe boy, maybe 20, actually. I keep undercounting. But yeah, it was a lot. He was getting velocity mogged. I know you love that term so much.
It's when the other one has more of whatever the thing is. Is that what the mogging means?
Yeah, he's getting out-angled by Jackson Jobe, basically.
Every single part of this that I learn is against my will. I just want people to know.
I'm aware. And I'm the one subjecting you to it sometimes. I'm sorry. This and reminding you of the Mariners' disgrace. It's really rough. And again, while I'm apologizing for doing that, just doing it again. So I think the concern really is whether there's something going on deeper than conditioning, just elbow stuff, shoulder stuff, whatever, just health stuff. And he denies that, and the team denies that, and they say that they're not concerned about that. But you have to wonder and you have to worry, because why do mechanics get off kilter and out of whack?
Right.
There could be any number of reasons. Maybe you just sleep funny in a hotel bed or something, or who knows? It could happen any number of ways. But one way that it can sometimes happen is if there is some sort of physical injury or
that you're compensating for.
Yeah, and you might not think it's serious. You might not even be entirely aware of it. Maybe your range of motion is slightly restricted in some way, and you're not even conscious of it, or you kind of talk yourself out of it being a concern, because pitchers always have something barking a little bit.
Right.
And so then maybe there's kind of a cascade where you change your mechanics to compensate for some sort of physical change, and then maybe that snowballs and maybe the initial problem goes away, but you've gotten to these bad habits, or maybe that problem persists. I don't know. No one seems to know. But if it were as simple as just, well, his mechanics are different, so let's just go back to what he was doing before. It sounds simple. I know it's easier said than done, but the nice thing is there's all this data and there's all this video, and so you can very easily call up, okay, what did Pete Skenes look like? And let me watch some video of that and let me compare. And I don't know how many overlays I've seen and synced up side by side footage and GIFs. And so I'm sure he's done that. I'm sure the Pirates people have done that. And so they could identify anything. There might almost be too many potential vectors causing this issue, because we have so many data points. You can look at the angle of every body part during the delivery, and so you could end up just falling too deep into the rabbit hole trying to figure out what's the thing that's causing the issue. But you'd think having all that data on what he was doing when it was working well, you'd just say, okay, just go back to that again. Okay, my arm was doing this and I was doing that, and now I'll just do that again, and we'll work it out in a couple of bullpen sessions, and I'll be back to my usual excellent self. So I don't know why that hasn't happened exactly. And I know it's tough to fix things on the fly, and it's mid-August, and maybe there's fatigue, and who knows what else is going on in his life. And so sometimes maybe you do need a reset in an off-season to sort of get back to square one and Paul's first principles or whatever, just find your base again. But it's flummoxing, it's confounding, it's frustrating, it's worrisome. Obviously, I hope it is just mechanics and that he can correct it and be back to his usual self. But the longer it persists, the more cause for concern.
I do have to, look, we've over the years given the Pirates the business. We've given them grief. I think that the stakes of his career and his effectiveness are so high for everyone involved that I am kind of inclined to believe that they have successfully ruled out a serious injury. And to your point, maybe there was something that was out of whack or tweaked or what have you earlier, and the compensation for that injury, which is no longer bothering him, has sent him down a path where he is sort of unable to course correct back. And he was compensating in his mechanics and now doesn't quite know how to get back to where he was. But I have to believe that they are aware of just how important it is, not only for this season, but for the next couple of years of competitive Pirates baseball, that this guy be available and healthy and effective. So even though it's easy to make Bob Nutting jokes, I'm sort of disinclined to do that in this instance, because I do think that they're aware of what they have, and they've certainly oriented the rest of their roster thinking around him being the guy, right? But it is pretty confounding, particularly because Skenes has previously made meaningful adjustments to his approach to pitching and done so successfully. So sometimes, and there are examples of very good players doing this and then needing really the full reset of an offseason to kind of go back to zero and correct. But guys who tinker to the point of just not being able to be good again for half a season, you think it's going to be the simple thing. You've been good before, go back to doing what you were doing. And, it can be more complicated than that. So it might be as simple as he needs, again, a full off season to really get right. But it's pretty alarming. You'd almost, I never want Skenes to be hurt, but it would almost be better if he were hurt, because then at least you'd be like, well, he's hurt, his elbows, he's got a shoulder thing or whatever. Again, I don't want that for him, particularly shoulders, because they're so much scarier than elbows, but you'd at least be able to say with some certainty, oh, it's this.
It's especially striking because he made it look so easy before. And I know it wasn't. He was just that skilled, but he looked like he basically never broke a sweat. He was he was just mowing people down from the day he showed up. And, he prides himself on going deep into games. And now he's not doing that. And he's back to delivering the sort of length that he did when he was strictly innings limited in the minors, but for different reasons now. And he was just such a phenom. And I guess it could be a case of someone who hadn't really struggled, or at least hadn't really struggled at a high level, because he was just so good, at least in the past few years, that this is the first adversity he has really encountered on the mound in the majors, at least. Like basically day one, he was, if not the best pitcher in baseball, then 1A as a rookie, and then certainly after that. So maybe it's even more of an impediment when things are clicking so well. But as you said, he definitely tinkered and was analytical and would add pitches and subtract pitches. So it's not like he was just a completely finished product on day one, or that he's not receptive to evolving and information and all of that. He certainly seems to be. So yeah, it is weird. And it's sort of sad to see him just look so mortal. He just looks like any other pitcher, sort of. Which says something about how good pitchers are now, that I'm just like, oh, ho-hum, he's throwing 97 or whatever. But there are a lot of guys who have been as effective as Skenes, or more effective than Skenes, over the past month or so. And he has, if you subdivide his season into a few different parts, it's just such a stark disparity. So I hope he gets back to being his old young self, preferably sooner rather than later. It would be great if he could go into the offseason without this hanging over him and feeling like, okay, I finally figured things out and I'll be good to go next year. But now I don't know if he's going to get to that point, or have the chance to get to that point, or whether this is going to be an off-season remodel, and we'll have to see how he does when he comes back. But yeah, especially with the lockout and everything, like I'm sure for his mental health and his mindset, I'm sure he'd like to put this behind him somehow and end on a high note, but he's far from that right now.
And I think that, you bring up a good point, because we'll remind listeners that once they are locked out, he's on his own.
True.
He can go to tread, he can go to driveline, he can do that. But like once they initiate the lockout, the team can't have contact with anyone on the 40-man. So it's not an ideal offseason if the Pirates feel like they need to have a hand in whatever adjustments he's making. It's not an ideal offseason for this to happen, because he'll be on his own, which there are good options out there. And there are plenty of pitchers who have, made use of private facilities and done so to their benefit. So I don't want to scare Pirates fans and say like, you're doomed now. You're not doomed, but it's going to be on Skenes. Now, he seems like someone who would be very interested in figuring out what's wrong with him. So I have confidence in his ability to like try to figure stuff out. But it is a weird year for them to have to maybe help this guy rebuild a little bit.
Yeah. And of course, he's not the type of player who doesn't have the resources to figure things out on his own or have independent coaching. And I guess you never know. It could actually work out to his benefit if he's forced to consult different sources.
Sure.
Not saying that this is Pirates' incompetence or blaming the Pirates for this, but clearly they haven't been able to solve whatever this is so far. So maybe getting some additional input, well, couldn't hurt probably at this point. Right. So we will continue to monitor that situation. Mm-hmm. And it is worth remembering that sometimes slumps just end and mechanics snap back into focus and whatever has befallen a player ceases to befall him. And I was thinking of this in the context of Fernando Tatis Jr. because he just had a big game and hit a couple homers and robbed what would have been a Francisco Lindor grand slam and did a very demonstrative, badass sort of stance after he brought it back. And it was making me remember how Fernando Tatis Jr. could not hit a home run to save his life to start this season.
Couldn't do it.
And we marveled at that and wondered what the heck was going on. Yep. And that was maybe even more confusing and inexplicable, but a little less concerning because he was still hitting the ball pretty hard and that made it even harder to unravel. But also you kind of figured, well, he can just keep doing what he's doing and eventually some of those balls will start to clear the fence, whereas clearly Skenes has to do something different. But Tatis, remember, he had not hit a home run through May 29th. He was still homerless. He had the most plate appearances by far, I think, of any homerless player through that point. And since then, after his most recent great game on Tuesday, he's tied for 15th in the majors in home runs. I mean, he has been, as one would expect him to be, one of the best power hitters in the game, as he had been before, as it seemed like he had the skills to be still. And I don't know, did he do something different? I mean, maybe he made some changes also, but that seemed like more of a case of stick with what has worked or what seems to be working under the hood, and eventually it will pay off for you. And he hasn't gotten back to his peak power output and before the suspensions and everything. I mean, he was a 42 dinger guy in his age 22 season. I don't know if or when he will be that guy again, but he could certainly be a 25 homer guy, which he has been pretty consistently, and he's been back to being that guy at least, while contributing in other ways too. So that's a relief because Fernando Tatis, whatever his misdeeds and suspensions and motorcycle mishaps, he remains one of the most charismatic, electric, compelling players in the game. And so it's been good to see him get back to being that guy again. Yeah. And also for the Padres to have him and Merrill and Machado all remember how to hit at more or less the same time and help power this Padres surge. Yep. That's been pretty fun to see because they remain a flawed team that has holes, but when it's working and when their stars are doing star stuff, they
it's pretty great.
Are still just one of the more watchable teams in baseball. And I'm kind of glad that they're back on a playoff trajectory because I like seeing them on that stage.
I agree. It's a much more fun version of the league when things are going well for San Diego. I root for that. And it's good, it can be easy to sort of write off the NL West and be like, it's the Dodgers. And obviously it is the Dodgers, but there are other talented teams in that division. And seeing them sort of show out the way you would hope they would and can is pretty exciting. So.
And don't deprive me of the Preller show. I will be so sad when AJ Preller's no longer running baseball operations for a team if that day ever comes, because no one's doing it like him, for better or worse, from the Padres' perspective. And entertainment value-wise, he really is an outlier in terms of just what he is willing to do and the prospects he is willing to surrender and also somehow keep regenerating and just being aggressive at all times. I've derived much enjoyment from AJ Preller's approach to running that team over the years. Sometimes it has worked out better than others for the Padres themselves, but it's always tremendous content one way or another.
Yep, that's right.
Another baseball institution that has seen some decline of late is the Field of Dreams game. Now, I wanted to bring this up to you because there's been some hand-wringing about the ratings for MLB at Field of Dreams, this latest incarnation, which was played last Friday. And this was on Netflix for the first time. And this was the first Field of Dreams game that we had for a few years, which honestly I had forgotten, which maybe says something about interest in the Field of Dreams game, but they had not actually played one of these since 2022. So the first one was in 2021, White Sox Yankees, and that was a huge success.
Yeah.
And then they came back the next year, Cubs Reds, and then they paused it for a few years while they were renovating and expanding the complex and, I don't know, growing some new corn or whatever they were doing. And then they came back here to complete the trilogy, the third edition, after a few years off. And one might have thought, well, will there be pent-up demand? Has everyone just been on the edge of their seats, deprived of the Field of Dreams game for a few years, and they'll all come flocking back? And no, that did not happen. This was a steep decline in terms of viewership. It was an average of 1.66 million viewers, according to Nielsen. And this was down from the 2022 edition, which was 3.1 million, and the 2021 edition, which was 5.9 million. And so everyone is wondering, well, what does this mean for the Field of Dreams game or for baseball on Netflix? And I think there are multiple things going on here, but also I think that this has just lost a little luster. I can't muster much excitement for the Field of Dreams game anymore. It was really cool the first time, but the third time is not the charm, at least for me. I didn't even watch myself, so I'm part of the ratings problem here. But I was vaguely aware that it was happening, but this was not appointment viewing for me, not this time.
I am on record as enjoying baseball happening in interesting places, you know, places that aren't your typical field. And I appreciate that, like, this facility remains in use for, like, youth sports and stuff. They played some prospect showcase games there. What a convenient place to make the scouts go. And all the kids, I'm sure that they loved that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying this is not a resonant media property for me. I'm not a Field of Dreams person. It's not my warm nostalgia. I'm not dissing it. It's just, it's not for me. Or it's not like, it doesn't grab me. You know, it's not a movie I dislike watching, but it's not one that I have sought out as like a rewatch in a long time. And so I think part of it is just that, like, once the novelty had worn off, other people who might be in that same camp where it's like, oh, the field. Wow, there it is. They came out of the corn. Isn't gonna, like, kind of maybe grab you in the same way. I think that there are other venues that they have pursued games at that are, I just think, more like interesting, if only because they are grounded in actual baseball history. I think that's part of why it hasn't continued to sing for me, because it's like the story in Field of Dreams is like based on baseball. It's not a baseball story though. Like it's not real. It's not real. And there are some liberties that were maybe taken with those players that are important to how it's different than what's real. I watched part of this game because I was like interested in the matchup, like, but it didn't grab me, because if I didn't already have a Netflix subscription that I've forgotten to cancel every month for the last like 10 years, I wouldn't have signed up just to watch this. Right. And then you get like the weird discordance between the story of the players in that movie, and then you have like gambling ads on the outfield wall. And I'm like, but you're Netflix. Have you seen this movie? Do you know about Jules Joe being in there? Like, does that matter? So, you know, I think that there have been times when they have shown a willingness to kind of prioritize other things than the pure commercialism in order to have things feel sort of like historically resonant and respectful. And it is disappointing that that wasn't true this time. So I don't know. But to offer sort of a different perspective, I don't know that it feels like a great use of resources to me for them to be endlessly finding like funky places to play baseball. So maybe it's good that they reuse it. I am curious like how much of the decline here is the fact that it was on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like if you do the Field of Dreams game and it's just, you know, the end, if it's Sunday Night Baseball, well, then I'm sure that it would have gone over great. And I would have loved to hear Benetti call a game there, you know, like that would have been cool.
Yeah, totally. Part of the problem with these comparisons is it's not apples to apples at all.
Right.
And people are comparing Netflix in 2026 to Fox 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just, it's different. So I don't think you can say this is necessarily a manifestation of lack of interest. But I do think there's also a little lack of interest. I think inevitably there's just diminishing returns here. And that's fine. I don't mind. It's not like I'm out here calling for the end of the Field of Dreams game. I'm not saying end it. I'm fine with it continuing to exist. I just don't think that people should expect it to be a big draw, whether that's MLB or Netflix or fans. And it's not like your average fan needs to care particularly how many people are signing up to watch this on Netflix. But other Netflix stuff has done better than this. And the Home Run Derby drew 5-point-something million people, which was, again, down, you know, when you could watch it, some of these things over the air or on cable or whatever. It was on multiple broadcasts. Then there's just a bigger pool, even in the cord-cutting era. So 5.3 million watched the Derby on Netflix, which was the lowest in 23 years, but I think that was more a manifestation of the venue. And then also you have, there's, you know, the opening night broadcast, the Yankees-Giants. That was about 3 million people tuned in to watch that, even though that broadcast was kind of a mess. And I think this broadcast, again, I didn't watch. From what I heard, it was more competently executed. It was less Netflixy than the first one. And some aspects of it, I think it's cool that they had, 25 Hall of Famers come out of the corn. I mean, it's kind of hokey to recreate the movie and everything. But
so hokey.
Yes, but I still like the spectacle of seeing 25 Hall of Famers together anywhere doing anything. It's just, Raleigh Fingers, he still has the handlebar. That's nice, you know? It's nice to see them. So I've got nothing against this. It's just I think people have to recalibrate what you expect from it. Plus, Phillies Twins, there was no particular tie. It was one thing when you had White Sox Yankees and, you know, White Sox and Shula's Joe and to have just sort of Phillies Twins interleague. I mean, there was nothing really resonant about this.
Yeah.
And it's coming back next year. It's going to be Red Sox and Royals, and it's going to be on NBC and Peacock next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're simulcasting it on NBC and Peacock. Probably the ratings will rebound. More people will have access to it. So it's relevant in that we are always talking about the audience just being segmented and fractured and cannibalized because everything is distributed among umpteen streaming services. So that's certainly still a concern. But I also think this just can't remain a marquee event forever. And also, Field of Dreams, it's a younger audience that watches on Netflix, which is good, I guess, for baseball's sake. The viewership for this game was a median age of 46, right? And if you're 46, you're maybe really just old enough to have appreciated Field of Dreams when it came out, but a lot of the younger audience doesn't really have any strong feelings about Field of Dreams either way and might not know about Field of Dreams. And the longer you do this, probably the less resonant the movie will be, even if this event itself helps keep the movie relevant. And I know you're supposed to have strong opinions about Field of Dreams. It's either supposed to be your favorite movie ever and it makes you cry, or you hate it and think it's a travesty and an abomination. And like you, I'm more in the middle. I like it. I like Field of Dreams, but I don't have. Sam and I did a little Field of Dreams debate back in March of 2020. What a wonderful time. Episode 1518, we did a whole episode on Field of Dreams and rewatched it and discussed it. It's extremely divisive, and I always feel I'm in the middle ground. I feel like I'm fence sitting, but I sincerely think it's a pretty good movie. It's not my favorite. I don't hate it. It doesn't offend me. But yeah, I think probably fewer people will have any real emotional connection to that movie the longer this goes on and the further removed we are from when it came out, which was a while ago. This is 1989.
It's my second favorite Kevin Costner baseball movie, put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that part of it is just like I thought that the way that they did the Rickwood Field game was so great.
Yes.
And again, it was a place that matters to baseball history. And it was, I think the broadcast they had around it was like pretty uncompromising in terms of trying to really grapple with the league's history of exclusion and what it meant to honor Negro Leagues baseball and to have a conversation that wasn't saccharine about integration, but that really, tried to get its arms around like what this meant for people who got to play there and what it meant for the league to sort of have the history of racial exclusion that it has. And I thought that I was very impressed with the balance they struck because they didn't shy away from that stuff, but they also, I think, were appropriately reverent of what that place means, right? And they were able to honor people in a way that was, I thought, really impressive because it's not something that's always in MLB's wheelhouse. Like the league doesn't always want to deal with this stuff, right? And they did a very good job. And again, it's honoring real history. Refurbishing that field means something to that community. It's still in use. And again, like the Field of Dreams field is too. But I just thought that was such a great event and I really enjoyed and was impressed by it. And so this just feels like a step backwards isn't quite fair because it's trying to do something a little bit different, but it's like to have an impact, right? Like that game and the attendant remodeling and all of this other stuff, like that has an impact. It's real. And so to retreat into fiction and to not, like, part of why people don't like that movie is it's not like super honest about the history, right? Like it tells a very particular story, and that doesn't mean it can't be a good movie. I love Moneyball as a movie. I think it's very successful as a movie. I remember there being a pitching staff on that East team, like you wouldn't know that from
Sure.
Other than the relievers, you like just wouldn't know that like anyone else pitched for them that year.
No.
This
Chad
is not
Bradford pitched every inning, as far as I can recall.
Exactly. This is not a new criticism of that film, but I think it's a very successful film. And I think it's really compelling and it's good. And I like it, even though I know the ways in which it is limited. But I would rather, if we're going to do this stuff, to use it as an opportunity to like really, move the sport forward. And it felt like Rickwood did that. And it doesn't feel like this does, which, for a gimmick game, like that's probably not a fair standard to put on it. But having seen it done well, I'm like, well, I don't know. I'd rather go back to Rickwood. I'd rather hear more about that story. I'd rather hear more about about Negro Leagues baseball. I think that would be a cool thing to do. I appreciate that like the league might feel like it's not politically fashionable, but I'm sorry, I'm going to do another square. F them. Like, do it anyway. Like, you know what I mean? And so there's that part. Also, just a note, if you guys are going to do this game, you got to take a game off from the gambling ads because it is just too ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is
it's
simply
really on the nose. It's
too ridiculous.
It's absurd. Yeah. It's
like, come on.
Yeah, I know. And obviously there's this distinction between fans betting on baseball and players betting on baseball, and the penalties are appropriately different, but nonetheless.
Nonetheless.
Yes.
Nevertheless.
Yeah. So I don't mind the idea of trying to eventize MLB games. I know it's almost anathema. You've got 2,430 games. It's just supposed to be this baseball soup that you sip from, and it's this warm, comforting broth that they that keeps you company all summer. Not that people love hot broth during the summer. I still do. I'll eat soup at any time of year.
Yeah,
But
you're Superman.
but I like the idea of making some games quote unquote special and stand out and highlight certain things that are culturally resonant. And I'd love if they just played a Rick Woodfield game every year or tried to stage some games at other Negro League sites or whatever. I mean, the Speedway Classic, you could call it a classic. That did not make it so.
Such a disaster.
Yeah, that was kind of a debacle when it came to organization and attendees and everything from all that was reported. But yeah, I didn't mind that initiative, that idea for just let's put baseball in an unusual place and won't that be memorable and compelling? And it was in some
Bristol,
ways.
baby.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So yeah, keep doing that. And by all means, keep playing the Field of Dreams game if you want to. I've got nothing against it. I just think that the first one being such a success maybe set expectations too high for how huge a hit this would be perennially. Yeah. And I think that was kind of a one-time response. It doesn't have to be a one-time event, but probably one-time ratings. And I know that this game was going up against preseason football too, and people are just so thirsty for football that even if the actual players aren't really playing and it's mostly meaningless, still they got to get their football fix. So that may have had something to do with it too. But yeah, I think there are many factors here.
Yeah. Do you really think that that's why? Do you think preseason football had? Maybe people were just mad about. They were like, "Oh, we got to spend our evening thinking about why the Seahawks decided to sign Terry and Arnold." I know I've been spending some of my evenings thinking about that. If you know,
better than thinking about the Mariners these days, I guess.
If you can sign a guy who's facing 8 felony charges, you got to do it. You know, that's like a no-brainer. Because, I mean, you run a zone scheme, so you gotta. I'm really sad about you not being a general sports guy anymore. Will you just start watching football for me?
I'm still dabbling. I'm keeping my toe in. So, yeah, I'm going to try to remain conversant. We'll see.
Did you ever feel a pull to football? Like, even as a kid, were you ever like, let's go Jets?
Well, no.
Okay. What was your team? Were you are you a Giants fan?
I was never really a fan of any particular team, but I did, I'm sorry to say, watch a lot of Cowboys football back in the day because, you and everybody else. Yeah, my step-grandfather, I guess you would say, my grandmother's husband at the time was a big Cowboys fan for whatever reason, and so I would watch football with him, and that was during their heyday, and so I got kind of into that, but I didn't feel a great fan affinity for them.
Gotcha. I don't ever blame people for like watching what's on in their household. You know, that's not your fault.
Yeah, I feel some residual bandwagon fan guilt when that happens because it's tough because how do I beat the allegations as a Yankees fan who watched them during their dynasty? I came by it honestly because I was a New Yorker at that time. I was a kid. What was I supposed to do? I mean, I guess I could have been a Mets fan. I could have made things harder on myself, but that just wasn't the way that I went. I was closer to Yankee Stadium and had family, at least extended family, who were Yankees fans and everything else. So, but yeah, I'm sensitive to the fact that I have not suffered for my love of sports, at least in a fan sort of way. So what can I say? You know, it was I was born into success when it came to the Yankees. So I'm paying my penance for that. All right. As Columbo says, just one more thing here. So I wanted to bring up this little prompt. Sam wrote something recently for Pebble Hunting about one of his favorite fun facts, which is, well, I'll just say how he put it on Twitter back in 2013. As he says in this story, he did not originate the fun fact. It has taken many forms, but this was how Sam tweeted it 13 years ago. Vin Scully called MLB games the same year that Connie Mack managed MLB games. Mack was born 10 weeks after the Emancipation Proclamation. So the fun of this fact is basically that two guys encompass pretty much all or almost all of professional baseball history, at least. You just kind of lay Mack and Scully end to end, and they cover the vast majority of professional baseball. And that's cool. And it's also kind of thrilling to know that Vin Scully and Connie Mack were both in the majors. They were doing their thing at the same time. They overlapped for 1 year, and Connie Mack may have been asleep on the bench for much of that time, but he was at least still technically managing, and he overlapped. And in fact, I believe Vin Scully's first game was a Connie Mack A's game. So it's kind of a cool connection. And so Sam was wondering who will be the third tine or prong of that fun fact, who will extend it, and who eventually will be the guy who overlapped with Scully, so that we can say that Mac begat Scully and Scully begat this person, basically. And it's just, so he ran through a number of possibilities, and I wanted to get your thoughts, if any, and I have some thoughts. It's like, how for years there was the fun fact, which was that there was still a living grandson of the 10th U.S. president, John Tyler, who died last year, finally, R.I.P. to Harrison Ruffin Tyler, the last living grandson of U.S. President John Tyler, who left the White House in 1845. And it was like, the mind boggled, because it was, that happens when someone has a kid really old, and then maybe their offspring, their son has a kid really old and lives a long time, and then their son, the son of the son, lives a really long time, and somehow it's just a few generations, and wow, there's still a direct living link to that person. So it's that, but for baseball. And so who will carry this forward? Who will pick up the baton and bear the eternal flame next?
I really struggled with this.
Yeah.
But my initial thought is Aaron Judge.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And let me just briefly specify. So Sam's criteria here, he just had a few. One, must overlap with Vin's career.
Yes.
And his last game was October 2nd, 2016. Ideally, he says, Vin Scully would have said this person's name out loud, as he would certainly have said Mac's name out loud. In an absolutely perfect world, Vin Scully cared about or was linked with this person, but that's a luxury request, not at all necessary.
Yes.
And finally, this person needs to be a big deal, no small deals. Connie Mack is the all-time winningest manager. Vin Scully is the greatest broadcaster of all time. Our standard isn't quite that high, but with all due respect to the great Brent Strom, somebody like Brent Strom wouldn't qualify. Not that I was going to suggest Brent Strom. So, those are the rubrics. So make the case for Aaron Judge.
Judge debuted in 2016.
Yes.
He debuted in August of that year. Mm-hmm. And crucially, so we'll talk about Judge and his bona fides as a player, but I think that, one thing working in the favor of Judge as the connective tissue is that the Dodgers played the Yankees that year. Mm-hmm. And so there is, after his debut, crucially, they had a series in New York.
They ended the season, or I guess Judge's season ended against, September 12th and 13th of that year. Yeah.
Correct. And so I did not go back to those games to try to see if he was mentioned. I suspect he was, that Scully would have had something to say about him, if only because Judge is a California guy. Mm-hmm. And so there is sort of even though, he's a Yankee, there's like a potential Dodger connection there just because of the proximity to Cali.
And he had to have mentioned him. Obviously, he was playing in the game. So,
I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a little story that was told, right? It is a fleeting connection, granted, but I think that when we are talking about the most important players in Major League Baseball over the last decade, that Judge is very high on that list.
Oh, yeah.
And not just because he's tall, right? And arguably after Ohtani, maybe the guy you would mention, which is kind of wild to think about just based on, how late he came up and what have you. But this is a player who has won multiple MVP awards. He was the Rookie of the Year. His presence looms large and his absence looms large. The moments when the Yankees have not been able to play him have been fraught for them, right? So I put forth Judge as a player because I think you can't Sam talks about in that newsletter, like why Ohtani is sort of a very tenuous connection, certainly I think qualifies, at least technically, based on what Sam has laid out, but it doesn't feel like it's quite in the spirit of the thing.
Yeah. Ohtani didn't make his MLB debut until 2018. He was obviously playing in Japan. He attained greater prominence in the U.S. in 2016. That was kind of his breakout year as a global figure of great interest. But
as Sam notes, that was the first year that you guys talked about him on the podcast.
Or at least, I think we first mentioned him in 2013, but we were like devoting an episode to him at that point.
Yeah,
but
you were locked in on
but it's still, it's fudging it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I think that there are ways in which Judge is sort of fudging it because, it's a very late, he's getting in under the wire.
I think that's good though. That's okay. Probably the ideal candidate would be just getting in under the wire because you want to maximize the longevity. It's like Scully and Mac overlap for 1 year. So you probably would want it to be that. Otherwise, you're minimizing the span that the three people can encompass.
Now, I think that it's optimistic in a way about the longevity of Judge as a going concern as a player, which I don't mean to say that like he's going to be done tomorrow or anything like that. But, this is his age 34 season and he has been injured for much of this year. And, I think it's very safe to assume that he has fewer MVP awards ahead of him than he has behind him. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that he's going to be a bad player. He'll probably still be a great player. He was a very good player this year, even though he was a diminished version of himself and has spent a lot of the season injured. So I don't think we're done with Judge by any means, but I think that his prominence in the game is probably on the back nine, Mm-hmm. So maybe in that way it's too limiting. I don't know what his ambitions will be after his playing career is done. It could be that he decides to be a broadcaster. It could be just that he decides to be a monk. It could be that he just like coaches his kids' little league games. I don't know. All these guys who want to stick around in public, I would love to be private and rich. That sounds great. Like just, there are people who, if they win the lottery, they're going to post more. I will post so much less, I'll still do the pod, but as we've established, we are going to have a weird conversation about the Patreon once it comes around.
Yeah, you can subsidize it. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But I'll be a kept podcaster. I'll be on your payroll. That's all right.
Yeah,
but the issue is, so Judge, obviously, he has the prominence to be the third part. But will he have the staying power?
Right.
Because he has to have another act, obviously.
Right.
Even if he had been younger when he came up and he was, 24 or something at the time.
Right.
Even if he had come up at 19 or he'd been Soto or Harper-esque or something and had a little more mileage ahead of him, he would still need the next act because I don't know that a player alone can't be the third, I don't think. Because
I think you have to have another...
Yeah. Because even if you're great, even if you have a Tommy John length career, that's 26 years, that pales in comparison to the 10 years of Mac and Scully. So you have to have a non-athletic role because athletic skills just don't last enough for you to make it. So Judge would have to attain some position of prominence and become beloved and stay at center stage and be a central figure in the game for decades after he retires. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that there's really any indication that will happen. So I think it has to be... It's tough to project this. I mean, that's why it's kind of a fun thought experiment because there's no way to answer it.
You have to be like, who's the best active player who will almost certainly be a manager? Like I think that the future beloved manager or future beloved broadcaster, those are the avenues that you have that I think offer to you the greatest chances of success.
I like that Mac and Scully did different things, and it almost unbalances the symmetry of the fun fact if you just get another player turned manager or broadcaster. Then it's almost like, you have two of a kind. I would almost love for there to be a third thing, a third occupation that could carry this on, but I don't know.
Who is the most, but see, like, I'm going to be annoying for a second. Like, all of the retired players who are like, I'm going to run for office, they suck. You know, they're
Yeah. If Mark Teixeira becomes an incredible congressman or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So enthusiastic about the Trump agenda. And it's like, okay, well, even regardless how you feel about that, and I hope that we are clear about how we feel about that, you're automatically alienating half the population, right? So it doesn't have the same, you need a neutral third thing, right?
Yeah. And it's also not baseball related anymore.
Right.
Even if you pull a Jim Bunning and you're in Congress forever and you play in the congressional baseball game, you're still not really you're a baseball emeritus figure. You're not really relevant to modern fans. And that's the thing. It's like Mac and Scully were really relevant to baseball until the very end.
I have one. What if Andrew Miller goes on to head the union?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Okay.
What if Andrew Miller, because he's part of the Players Association now, his post-playing career, he works with the union. What if Andrew Miller goes on to head the union?
Yeah, that's not bad. He was playing for a decade before Scully retired, but yeah, maybe he could go on. I mean, he retired fairly young.
I don't know if he was a good enough player. He was very prominent, right?
Yeah.
And for a while was, he was part of that he was a super important part of that Cleveland team that almost won a World Series. And sort of had his moment of, we got to think differently about relievers because of Andrew Miller, and look what he can do. He can come in, he can pitch whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
so
I don't think he has to have been that great a player because Connie Mack wasn't that great a player.
That's true.
He is known for being a manager for 50 years after he was a player manager. But the fact that he was a player before that helps extend his time span, so it would help with Miller as well. And Miller, he had his moments, obviously. Like, he was a pretty prominent player at times and had heroics and everything. But
he's just not Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani, I guess, is the distinction I'm trying to draw.
So if he went on to be some sort of Marvin Miller-esque figure, and that would be hard to do, I think, in this day, because to be the head of the union now.
Marvin Miller.
Right. So could you be that kind of... He could hang around. He could do the job for a long time. He could be beloved by players. But would fans have any particular attachment to him? Would he be seen as some sort of visionary or just a steady hand at the tiller or whatever? Like, I don't know. Maybe he could somehow transform the Players Association, but I don't know how he could do that to the extent that he'd be so associated with the union the way that Mac was with managing or Scully was and is with broadcasting.
What if a former player goes on to be the commissioner? Maybe that's the... Yeah. Maybe that's the avenue. Not that... And like, what's the commissioner equivalent to being Marvin Miller, right? Like, Manfred's already done the pitch clock. We have that. Right?
Yes.
You're the commissioner that oversees the implementation of the full RoboSun. The only things that I can think of a commissioner doing that would be historically notable, even if evil, I don't want to root for. It's like, you're the commissioner that broke the union. That's terrible.
Yeah. And
that's bad.
And commissioners are widely loathed. That's almost part of the job description, which I guess doesn't mean that you couldn't still be the third member of this. If you were like a Gary Bettman kind of figure who just lasted forever to the point where no one could remember anyone being commissioner before you were commissioner, then that would still count, even if you were booed every time you showed up at the draft or something. And what's working for you there, and I remember doing an afterball and Hang Up and Listen about this, is that commissioners rarely lose their jobs these days. I mean, once you get that gig, you're there for decades for the big four, at least these days, unless you retire. Like, rarely is there any turnover. So yeah, once you get in, and you'd need to get a player who obviously was very sympathetic to the owner's interests, because that's what the commissioner is. But that's not unheard of. So
it's not unheard of. And, they do have a number of former players who are populating the commissioner's office, right? Who have like special advisory roles in the commissioner's office and are doing things that might make them, at least initially, more sympathetic, right? Like if CC Sabathia became the commissioner, because I'm just thinking of someone who's is involved in the office and has a role in the league office, he would, I imagine, have a longer honeymoon than some alternatives, right? Because everybody loves CC, right?
Yeah.
He's a Hall of Famer. So like, I wonder if the answer is someone like that who ends up having a very senior role within the league office and is viewed favorably. So maybe it's not someone who becomes the commissioner, but someone who oversees, an important improvement to the game. I don't know.
Yeah. It is so tough to forecast because we're trying to think of, okay, who came around about 10 years ago who could go on to become a legend? And if you had asked people in 1896, like a decade after Connie Mack started playing, no one would have known that he was going to go on to be who he was. And even if you had asked people in 1960, would they have said that Vin Scully would have been as big a legend as he became? Probably not. They might have said, oh, he's a good broadcaster and he's young and hopefully he sticks around. But yeah, he's really one of one and singularly beloved. And Sam does consider many candidates. I won't spoil his whole post. People should subscribe. But he considers Joe Davis, for example, Vin Scully's successor. And he was super young when he started. So that's good. He could last a long time. But as Sam noted, he does half the Dodgers games now, so he's not maybe as much of a local institution. And can anyone be really as Vin was? I mean, in this era of multi-person booths and people maybe not listening on radio as much, and then also guys doing multiple sports, which Vin Scully did too, but maybe Joe Davis doesn't stay baseball only. So I'd like to think that it could be Joe Davis or Jason Benetti for that matter, or, one of the...
I was going to say.
Yeah, but it's hard to do that these days and for fans to form that same bond with one broadcaster on a national and local level the way that people did with Scully.
Right.
Tough to repeat those exact circumstances. And Sam considers some... basically anyone who was active in 2016, especially some of the young Dodgers from back then, or Andrew Friedman, who might go on to be looked at as one of the most successful baseball executives in history. And he was 40 when Scully called it quits, so that hurts, but he could still hang around for quite a long time. So maybe. And he considers Buster Posey, Hall of Fame player who retired young and obviously has gone on to a second act, which has not been super successful so far, but maybe he will right the ship and go on to be a great baseball executive. Who knows? And Sam mentioned Kelsey Whitmore, women's baseball trailblazer, 2016 Sonoma Stomper. So yeah, it's almost certainly someone, if it's anyone, whom you wouldn't expect, much as you would not have expected Scully in 1960 or Mack in 1896. But it's still a fun thought experiment. But it might be someone, it would be someone we know now. That's what makes it so tantalizing, because it can't be someone who's just totally unknown now, I don't think. They have to be somewhat prominent, but could also be someone you'd never suspect.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he considers Ohtani. Even if you count Ohtani, we have no idea what Ohtani will do after he is done playing, and he might do nothing baseball associated, or he just, so as much of a legend as he is, who knows whether he will have that sort of staying power. So, maybe it's effectively wild. Maybe if effectively wild.
Gosh.
We overlapped with Scully. We started
definitely not
in
us,
2012. We keep cranking out 3 episodes a week for the next 60 years or so, and maybe we'll be the last link to Scully's era. I'm kidding. However, I do think there's something. So my suggestion about this, I went a little bit off the board. So Sam was mostly considering human beings and people in keeping with Mack and Scully. He did suggest, maybe much to your dismay, the Savannah Bananas, because that team was founded in 2016, and it was a very different kind of Bananas team. It was a summer collegiate team at the time. This was before Banana Ball really started.
Post-disaffiliation, pre-Banana Ball.
Yeah, and, Scully probably wouldn't have heard of them or mentioned them or anything, but they did technically overlap. And if banana ball does go on to be incredibly popular or like the new dominant variant of the sport or something, then I guess that could potentially apply. And Sam considers everyone up to and including Charlie Kershaw, Clayton Kershaw's son. So, he cast a wide net here. My suggestion, though, I think it is not a person, a human being at all. I think it's StatCast.
Oh.
I think StatCast will be, because StatCast has a lot going for it here. It launched publicly in 2015, so it did overlap with Scully, and obviously he was aware of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he mentioned it in some way. And 2016 was when they ironed out some of the kinks, and that was when MLB acquired Baseball Savant, and they debuted Barrels and everything, so that almost felt like the year when it matured. So the timing works, and I think that you can't count on any person being prominent that far into the future, but we can say with a high degree of confidence that as long as there is Major League Baseball, there's going to be some sort of StatCast-esque tracking tech, right? And unless we get some Luddite revolution and we cast out the machines and we smash all the computers and cameras or something, probably as long as there is an MLB, there will be some sort of tracking tech that is StatCast or its equivalent. And maybe the brand is so established now, the moniker StatCast is so associated with the tracking tech that they'll just keep that name and the system will continue to evolve as it has, right? Like they incorporated Hawkeye and they continued to call it StatCast. And so maybe whatever the next, if they're tracking players' pulses or cortisol levels or reading their minds to expose their innermost fears and deepest desires, like that'll still be called StatCast, right? Or if not, people might still at least remember that there was such a system as StatCast and that it preceded whatever the state-of-the-art successor is. So that's good. I think we can say that it would have some sort of staying power. And I hesitated to suggest this because you're going person to stat system.
Right.
So that sort of screws up the symmetry of the fun fact, too.
It doesn't feel very Venn, I'll say that.
That's true. And yeah, it does cement the perception that, baseball is just nothing but nerd numbers now, and we're losing the human element, and what a sad commentary on the game it is that the new Vince Scully would be StatCast, right?
Right.
Now, by 2070 or whatever, maybe nobody will be bothered by that, and maybe society will have evolved or devolved to the extent that you won't even draw that distinction, or nobody will be lamenting how statistically oriented or technologically oriented baseball is anymore. But I think it's evocative to link the guy who goes back to the Emancipation Proclamation and StatCast. I think that's what that has going for it, because when you can say, it's 2 steps removed. We can go from Connie Mack, old-timey Connie Mack, via Vin Scully to this network of cameras and computers that would have made Mack soil his suit because he was so awed by this data being available.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for that. So, fast forward several decades and you can connect Mac and StatCast. I think that actually kind of works.
I'm open to that as a rationale. I'm open to it. I still am inclined to go in a more human direction, at least initially, because Vin was just so human, you know? But I think you're right that when you're sort of linking the eras, there is something pretty remarkable about thinking about someone who, to span that sort of length of progression, although, going from Emancipation to StatCast, you're sort of ending on a whimper in terms of relative importance. But, there is something compelling about that and the reminder that this is an institution that has seen a great deal of advancement, some more important than others, but still meaningful and appreciable, right? So, yeah.
Well, Sam did weigh in on this because I left a comment on his post after reading it, as I sometimes do. And his verdict on my suggestion of StatCast, and I laid out my rationale, Sam wrote, absolutely the best answer.
Ah, well, there you go.
Now, he didn't hear the Aaron Judge suggestion, so it's possible that, I mean, he may have considered Aaron Judge. I don't know. But but I swayed Sam, at least. I won Sam over, and he added person to stat might not be an issue in 40 years if all our technology has been anthropomorphized.
Yeah,
which is maybe kind of a dismaying idea, I guess. But if we get the non-dystopian outcome of that, where, we interact with computers in a sort of Star Trek computer way, you know, and a less, everything is ruined way and AI psychosis way, then it's true. You might not draw as much of a distinction, or you might not think of computers as kind of cold calculating entities or something. I don't know that that's good, but there might be less of a distinction drawn there. Yeah. Hopefully people will still recognize the difference between flesh and blood, unless, we're into Cylon, cyborg, human replica robots territory at that point. But that's a whole other can of worms.
Maybe they'll know how to dance, though.
Maybe. That will do it for today. Thanks, as always, for listening. You can support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Paul Harding, Ben Gibson, Ryan, Tree Wizard, and Max Seifert. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to a 3rd unrestricted episode each week. That's coming up next time. A monthly bonus episode, membership in our Discord group for patrons only, exclusive live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, shoutouts at the end of episodes, potential podcast appearances, FanGraphs memberships, and more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes in the podcast post at FanGraphs or Patreon, or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We will be back with one more episode before the end of the week. Talk to you soon.
Does baseball look the same to you as it does to me? When we look at baseball, how much do we see? Well, the curveballs bend and the home runs fly. There's more to the game than meets the eye. To get the stats compiled and the stories filed, fans on the internet might get riled, but we can break it down on Effectively Wild.